Hey, what's going on, everybody? Hope everybody is doing fantastic tonight, whenever you are seeing this. Listen, I really want to continue our last conversation of, looking at who is God. And I hope that from the last video of that, it kind of scrambled your brains a little bit, right? Kind of raised some questions, kind of provoked some thoughts for you to carry, to share, to have some questions even that you might have in regards to maybe, do you really know who God is? Or if you do, is this something that you may not have considered or thought of? And maybe if you're completely new, you want to know more and you're just continuing to come. So I thank you for that. This is definitely a blessing to do. And so let's look at this, right? So who is God? Well, part two, right? And so last video, if you remember, we looked at him being a spiritual being, eternal being, and infinite or unlimited. And there's one thing I really want to throw in there before we go into today's discussion, is really just hinting or further understanding that, the question might have came to mind was, well, wait, Jesus is man. Or Jesus was man and became man. So does that mean he wasn't God? And no, that's not what we're essentially saying, right? The essence of God's nature is not man, right? So Jesus became man. Okay. So for you to become something, that means that you weren't once something, right? So Jesus hasn't always been man, right? And wasn't man until he became man for us, right? So he became man in flesh and human flesh to fulfill the prophecies that were written of him in the Old Testament, in which he was to come and die for our sins and transgressions, rise early Sunday morning, resurrect from the grave, and we'll get into that as well. But I just wanted to make that clear that Jesus, who did come in the form of humanity, became man for us. But the essence, the natural essence of God is spirit, or spiritual being. So let's continue, right? So today I just really want to look at this one thing, understanding that God is not only a spiritual being, eternal being, and unlimited, but he is also the ultimate creator. Okay, now this could raise a lot of questions for us, right? Well, what about science, right? That could be a question for you. Well, I thought the Big Bang Theory was legit, or I thought that science had it down pat. When you open up the science textbook and we start going through the formality of man and the creation and evolution and all these other things. Well, let's walk through that really briefly of what the Big Bang Theory really is. And for those of you who have never heard of the Big Bang Theory, I challenge you to look it up. I might not get it completely right, but I'm going to get a chunk of it rather, just a little bit. But the Big Bang Theory is essentially that the world, the universe, everything that we see today was culminated in a little ball that expanded in an amount of time. Right? So in the beginning, there was nothing. Science even agrees with this, that in the beginning, there was nothing. And science tends to lean in the direction that there was a ball that expanded. And within this ball that expanded, it had all the materials that were needed, molecules that were needed, that ended up becoming what we see today. The sky, the sun, the waters, the land, all of these things that we see, that we easily have access to and can visibly see on an everyday basis. And so the Big Bang Theory, right? It was just this big old bang that occurred. And now we start seeing things form, motion, and come together over millions of years, over a time span of millions of years. That includes evolution from animals to evolving to something different. Man that first was monkeys, or first were apes, or Neanderthals, and all of these things that take part when we speak of evolution, and ultimately culminates into the beginnings of evolution, which is the Big Bang Theory. And so if you are someone who believes in science and believes in those things, and I'm not knocking science, in fact, science shows a lot of evidence to a lot of the questions that we may raise. But here is something that I think we should consider and should want to consider. If there is to be an ultimate creator, right, who we recognize is God, then he must be on the outside of what he created, right? Kind of like if you're painting a painting, right? If you're a painter and you have plenty of paintings, you are the one who's outside of the canvas, putting on these paintings on the canvas to formulate what it is, that the image that you are looking to portray in your painting, right? So the painter to the painting is the kind of combination or outlook that we're looking at. in terms of who God is. So God, much like a painter, has created everything that's around us, right? So to kind of push back or argue against the idea that the Big Bang Theory was indeed the first thing of evolution or the first thing of creation, this is the argument that I would present to you. Who then do you think placed the ball in the middle of nothing for the ball to expand in molecules to then expand and explode into everything that we see today, right? And let me put it in this perspective, because many times, or everyday life, for something to be acted on, right, it takes an outside force to act on it, right? If we take two objects, for example, let's say crash cymbals, right? If you've played the instrument of crash cymbals, where it's by hand and you're crashing them together, right? I imagine that there's handles of some sort, right? And it's sitting on a table, still and not touched, right? So you and I are in a band and an orchestra. Well, these crash cymbals are not going to crash themselves. These crash cymbals are going to lay flat on the desk that is presented, that they're laying on, until an outside force comes in, places their hands within the handles of the crash cymbals, and then proceeds to pick them up and clap their hands together, right? So outside of that person coming in, picking up the instrument and clapping their hands together, the crash cymbals are never going to make a noise, a sound, or do what they were essentially made to do in the sense of a band orchestra. Let's look at a different example. If you have a window in your room somewhere, or imagine just a window, right? This window that's in the frame of a home, that is built in the home, this window is going to remain still and in a still state until something on the outside of the window, whether it's from the outside of the home or the inside of the home, other than the window, something has to act on that window for the window to then break and shatter. Outside of that outside force coming in that acts on the glass for the glass to break eventually or off of one strike, the glass will remain still. So again, we see an opportunity where the outside force has to act on the stillness, or the stillness of the object that would remain still outside of an outside force acting on it. Much like those two examples, that is the painting that we can get from the ultimate creator and God. So if we are going to use the Big Bang Theory, well, then my question would be, who created the bang? Because nothing makes a noise of itself. There is something that causes the noise, right? Every alligator that has its growl, every animal or lion that has its growl, the dog that has its bark, the cat that has its meow, all of these things. Well, the dog, the lion, the alligator has to enact something for that noise to come about. Otherwise, you would never hear a noise that they would make. Much like if you were to hold a glass. If you were to hold a glass cup, the glass cup won't break unless you drop it, unless you crush it, unless something of that magnitude causes the glass to break, which is an outside force. Again, I paint that picture to show us that God, being the ultimate creator, he is the one who is outside of time, space, and matter that was created to then create everything we see, matching with Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, where we read, "In the beginning, God." And we answer our question of time, space, and matter, in which God creates from then, that he also, creates time, space, and matter, and then the heavens and the earth. And from that point, we see God speaking things into existence: the skies, the mountains, the dry land, the seas, all of these things that we easily see on a day-to-day basis. We understand from the biblical worldview that it was God who, again, is a spiritual being, eternal being, unlimited, and the ultimate creator. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I cannot wait to see you again to continue this conversation. And I hope these things are sparking some thoughts, some questions, some deeper thinkings, and kind of wanting to learn more. And I'm hoping that these things are helpful for you in starting these conversations and these thought processes. But until next time, peace.